I can't just go and ask somebody what they think about this or that. Talking about what I believe brings condemnation. What would be your advice to people who are going to go up and ask people, how do they do it without running into something that will just polarize them back into their own corner further?
It's the left's fault, and I'm going to call out all my fellow lefties. You guys suck at talking to people who disagree with you. You suck at making arguments. You suck at being objective. You suck at being reasonable. Stop painting every single Trump supporter as a racist. Stop painting every single person who disagrees with you and might lean more Republican as a Nazi. And how about this? Let's go old school. Ask someone.
Oh my God,
Ask a
no,
real-
no way. I can't handle confrontation and talking to people who don't agree with me, dude. It's the worst.
So go in with it tell yourself, I'm gonna swallow my tongue when I want to be like, I don't believe that, that's crazy. And just figure out where somebody else who disagrees with you's positions are. Right? So go talk to, if you're on the left, go talk to a Trump supporter. I still do this all the time and say, why do you think this? Because I've heard this from the right or whatever, or what do you think about this political event? And when how they saw this major thing over the last like 8 years, completely different than you, just take that information in. Don't offer your normal pushback. Don't offer your rebuttals. Notepad. Write it all down in the little noggin or on an
And just
actual
ask
notepad.
the question, how could they have seen it so differently, and how could you have missed everything that they saw? How's that possible?
And then Google. Because you will, if you are genuinely like, I've never heard this, or this seems like crazy out of left field, there's no way that's true, you'll go find it, and you'll realize it's a way more wide-ranging perspective than you saw. And look, there are times that all of those channels I mentioned that I tend to agree with more. There are times I disagree with them, and that is because I get a diet of both. But the times I disagree with them is like 5% compared to 95% on the other side, because I'm trying to do an objective analysis. And I think we've reached a point where there is no, like, to even pretend that the two sides of the current political spectrum are equally opposed is lunacy when we're talking about a candidate who, as I laid out earlier, clearly tried to steal an election. Like, even if you agree with it, if Donald Trump had the politics of Bernie Sanders, I would be calling him a traitor.
Right. And that's the thing. That's that's honestly what changed my opinion on Trump completely, was when you laid out for me how he was actually the one that actually tried to steal the election. And I'm like, wow, that's that brought his character in my eyes at that point from all the way down.
Yeah.
There's no legitimacy there. It's completely dishonest.
Yep.
It's wild. One thing I do want to say about that, though, Johnny, that I was just very, I guess, grateful to meet you was I am a type of person where I do want to ask other people what they think. And I do want to be objective, and I do want to know what they and why. Because ultimately, I want to find out the truth, even if it doesn't agree with what I previously held a belief in. I ran into this issue where I can't do that. I can't just go and ask somebody what they think about this or that, because even me talking about what I believe just brings condemnation, or hinting to that, hey, I'm curious what you think about this, and you were kind of the first person that like was nice enough to like not burn me at a stake when I brought like something I believed to you and asked, how do you dispel this? What do you think of this? What would be your advice to people who are going to go up and ask people, how do they do it the right way without running into something that will just polarize them back into their own corner further?
Yeah. All right. It's the left's fault. And I'm going to call out all my fellow lefties. You guys suck at talking to people who disagree with you. You suck at making arguments. You suck at being objective. You suck at being reasonable. Stop painting every single Trump supporter as a racist. Stop painting every single person who disagrees with you and might lean more Republican as a Nazi or any of those things. And maybe you're like, oh, I don't really do that. Go back and look at your Facebook feed. Go back and look at the type of rhetoric you have when you're in your own enclave. And you absolutely do. And so what problems is what leaks out into those conversations is you are, even if you don't think you're messaging that way, it comes across that you really fucking don't like these people. And they can tell. So then they just don't bring it up. And look, I'm guilty of this from time to time because I do feel like there is a slow progression towards fascism happening in this MAGA movement. And that's, I mean, again, when we're talking about stealing elections, it's nothing's much more fascist than that, right? So,
Mike Lindell advertises his pillow as $14.88.
the Nazi dog whistle.
Dude, unreal.
So, and look, for the left, be curious, not judgmental. It's the greatest quote in the universe. You are probably not curious enough, just like I'm talking to the right about how could somebody come to this totally different perspective than mine, just interpreting the facts. You're not curious enough about how someone could come to believe those things. So instead of being curious about it, you make some judgment like, oh, they must just be bigoted. They must just be racist. They must just not like my party because they want to hold people down who are marginalized. That's not how normal people operate. That's true for like the tiny 1, 2, 3%. The average MAGA supporter just wants government off their back. They want a better life for themselves. They want the same things you do. They want better values. It's just they've been propagandized to hell. And so, just like you've been propagandized to hell. Now, again, maybe your propaganda is more true than their propaganda. That could be. Objective analysis will determine that. But how one comes to the beliefs is not their choice. It's not like they woke up like, I'm going to choose the fascists. Yay. Like exactly. they come to believe that to be the case. And then they turn to the strongman that is Donald Trump because they're like, he's the only one making any sense to me. And so to get to the bottom of that, you got to be nice. You have to be real with them. You have to do that. So let's say you can't find any of the lefties that actually take my approach and are nice and are kind and hear their perspective out. Now,
our Discord is open.
Yeah, right. You come hang out with us. I want you to go to journalism school and get your little spiral weave notepad and flip a couple pages and write over and over again every other page. Don't respond. Just ask questions. Don't respond. Just ask questions. Play stupid and then go talk to a lefty. Look, I'm not politically connected at all, and you seem to know stuff about this. What's the deal with January 6th? Is that a big deal? Should I care about that? like play as dumb as possible and just hear someone who's willing to explain their perspective. Don't respond. Take notes. Even if you feel yourself, again, the disagreement regurgitation, it's very, very hard not to go. I want to tell a story about this. And it was one of my favorite conversations I ever had because I actually made my mother do this. Now, for perspective, my mother is full MAGA. She's a pastor. She is about as extreme right-wing as she can get. She denies vaccine validity. She denies the election. She, like, go down the list of, like, those, like, right-wing, like, common, like, positions that have been common in the far right. She has them all. At one point, she told me her opinion towards the Middle East was she really felt like she could care less if we just wiped out all of the majority Muslim countries. That's how far right and far Christian nationalism she is. Like, she is pro-Holy War. Okay? So, trying to communicate with this person is very difficult for me because I find it taxing and frustrating. They're so diametrically opposed to where I sit that it's like sometimes you can not even know where to begin. So, in a totally unrelated thing to anything like that, here's an example of a conversation that was interesting. I asked my mom if she would be willing to witness me having a disagreement with people where we discuss things on a philosophical level where we're trying to get at truth rather than the type of arguments her and I would always get into. And so we sat down and the particular topic at hand was, do people have souls? And Very philosophical, right? Like very chunky. You might be rolling your eyes, but I sat down with somebody who kind of thought more of the reincarnation kind of concept of souls, and another person, that was my wife actually, and another person who thought more of the, I would say, traditional like Judeo-Christian concept of souls, right? You have one soul, it's gonna go to the good place or the bad place, or at least to somewhere after you die. And then you had me, the super scientific skeptic who thinks souls are bullshit. And I wanted my mom to witness three people having a philosophical conversation that didn't turn bad. And so I asked her to sit there and not respond for an hour while we worked this out. And we presented arguments back and forth. And it was remarkable because at the end of it, my mom just went, that was all very interesting. And didn't provide that. And so what's the moral of that story? Set up your conversation and agree on the rules. So many things turn into a political fight or political argument because you don't agree on the rules. One of the things I did with you when we first started talking about these things is, look, I'm not necessarily trying to change your mind. I'm curious about your perspective if you're willing to be curious about my perspective. So let's talk about this. I'll present counter arguments where I see fit, but the goal is to see if we can get any closer at the end of this conversation. And if at any point we derail or we start to get into a fight, that's not going to be very productive. So I'll just remind us that the goal is to try and see if we can see each other where we're coming from. Right? And see if we can make sense of our different perspectives. And if you set the conversation up with agreeing on that mutual goal, I promise you, you'll have a 110% better conversation.